You know, everything is good in the fall as long as your corn is standing. Once your corn starts to fall over, then it becomes panic time. Oh my goodness, my corn's falling over. I can't get the combine through quick enough. We're gonna have trouble here.
Yep, so today we wanted to focus on what to do on your farm going into next year. We realize there's nothing much you can do this year other than just try to get out and harvest as early as possible. But what can you do going into next year with some steps starting already this fall to prevent this kind of issue from happening again?
Well, you know, we had an interesting year on our farm. We were pretty wet through a majority of the year. And when corn has wet feet, a lot of times that provides the opportunity for disease and some kind of infection to get in through the root system. You may not know this, but that's where a lot of your stalk rot issues in corn will start off, as a root infection, and that disease will move its way up into the plant, and all of a sudden you've got disease up through your stalk. Now this can be a really big deal. It can take away some yield from you, but also the harvestability of that crop can be a big factor, where if you've got a soft stalk, you could have corn falling over with a heavy wind, or just from the weight of that great big ear that you're going to put on, that could take that plant over with even a mild wind. So you do want to keep on the lookout in your fields for any of these kinds of issues. Now where I like to look is on the lowest part of the plant, because typically with stalk rot, it's not going to start at the middle of the plant or at the top of the plant. It's going to start in that bottom foot. So when I'm going through cornfields this time of year, I want to squeeze that stalk down towards the bottom. If it's good and hard and I can't squeeze it at all, I'm not worried. I'm looking at the next field to see if I've got some issues. But if I can squish that stalk with my hand, that is a problem, and I'm going to mark that down in my field records that, hey, we need to do this one first, even if it's just a little bit wet.
Okay, so Darren mentioned the crop having wet feet early on is one of the biggest culprits. That's one of the reasons why we have stalk rot problems, so let's talk about fixing that. Now obviously we can't fix Mother Nature. If we're going to have a wet year, we're just going to have a wet year. But some practices you might want to consider are improving the surface drainage on your farm, and of course doing some tiling. Now when you do drain tile, if you do it right, it can actually be a great thing for your farm and for your crop, but it can also be a great thing for the environment too. All we're trying to do with drain tile is lower the water table. So typically in our farm, we're putting our tile in at 3 feet deep. There are some farmers who might go 4 feet or even 5 feet in some situations, but we like a 3-foot depth. We don't get a lot of moisture in our area of the country, but what we do get, we would like to get rid of fairly quickly if it's in excess. So by having that 3-foot depth, we can move the water out of the field fairly soon, but we don't lower that water table so dramatically that it totally depletes the field or anything like that. Well, with the drain tile, if we can just lower that water table and give our crop a good 3 feet to grow in, you will reduce the incidence of stalk rot, you'll reduce the incidence of lodging and problems that you're going to have in the fall, and tiling is something you can take care of yourself this fall on your farm.
One other thing that we should mention when we're talking about roots and keeping those roots healthy is insect feeding. Now if you're using a trait like say VT3 corn or even Smart Stacks corn where you've got a BT in there, you still have to keep in mind that rootworms that you're trying to stop do have to take a bite of those roots in order to ingest that BT protein and be killed. So you've got to look at that as, wow, they still are going to be biting my roots a little bit. That's still going to open my roots for infection. Even a low rate of insecticide right out at planting time with our seed, that will help protect and control a lot of those rootworms before they ever take a bite. It's a good 1-2 punch for rootworm control with a trait, but also it's a real nice helper to reduce the amount of stalk rot issues that you'll see in your field.
Okay, so we've talked about the drainage, we've talked about insects, but what I think is the most important thing to preventing stalk rot, other than of course variety selection, which is a big deal, it's really overall fertility, especially with potassium. Potassium is one of the most important components of the stalk of the plant, and what we find all over the country is the most neglected major nutrient is not nitrogen, it's not phosphorus, it is potassium. And one of the reasons why it is neglected is a lot of people will say, oh, we've got all kinds of potassium in our soil. Well, you do, but most of that potassium is in the form of a rock. Okay, how quickly does rock become available for your plant? Not very quickly at all. On our farm, I could just tell you we were having so many issues with stalk rot and lodging and low yields, poor grain quality, until we realized, you know, we need to fix this potassium problem that we've got. So we spend quite a few dollars every year on both corn and soybeans fertilizing with potassium, and it has dramatically changed our farm. So if you're not fertilizing with very much potassium, I would encourage you to do some soil testing and make sure that when you're soil testing, you get a base saturation test done so you can really determine the level of K percentage in your crop, and also follow up with some plant tissue analysis during the summer to see where you're really at in each plant in terms of potassium.
Now the other thing, we talk about potassium, and that is a big deal. I also look at the micronutrients. While potassium is the most neglected primary nutrient, I think micronutrients are the thing that's the most deficient across the whole country, and really not just in our country, but all around the world. Everywhere I travel, micronutrients are this huge issue that, wow, you know, we do an okay job with NP and K, but something's still not right here. And as soon as we start putting some micronutrients out there, the disease tolerance for our plants gets better and the performance does as well. So take a look at micronutrients in addition to potassium in various areas of your field as potential causes of stalk rot.
All right, so we've been talking about stalk rot a lot, and all these things that you can do on your farm, picking better varieties, just doing a better job with overall fertility, insect control, water management. Those are really important things, because what it basically comes down to is if your plant is super healthy, the odds are slim that it's going to pick up stalk rot, even if that disease happens to be present out in your field. And if you do get the problem, it's not going to be nearly as bad if all the other things are great. So let's say that you do have a major issue with stalk rot this year, you weren't able to fix the problems, but you'll try to fix it next year. What do you do just to get by here this fall?
Well, this is kind of an interesting thing. We have had some corn down on our farm before, whether it's a stalk rot issue or just some heavy wind. If you're lucky, it's all facing the same way, and then you can at least deal with that problem. If it's laying every which way, like a lot of times stalk rot ends up, that's a challenge, just trying to feed all that material into the combine head, ears included.
Yeah, because some people will use reels. We on our farm have never tried a reel before. All we've done is just slowed the combine way down, gone 1 mile an hour, and we have literally combined some whole fields at 1 mile an hour. It took 2 or 3 days in some cases, where normally it would only take a few hours, and we still had loss. I mean, that's the whole issue here. You've got to do everything you can to try to prevent lodging, prevent stalk rot, so you get the most bushels in the fall.
The other thing you want to prevent is our weed of the week. We'll show you why coming up next.